Well, are you ready? We can let people in.
Yeah.
All right. Read. Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I know some folks are still connecting. Hey, Miss Brenda. Hey, Tish. Hey, Z. Hey, Audrey.
Hello.
David Valentine, where you been?
Hi, T.
Hey. Yo, those hoop house pictures were amazing. Thanks for sending those.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
We're excited.
I know. Are you thinking you'll be growing something like, what are you thinking? Like, gonna start early spring this year, or are you gonna wait?
Yes, definitely.
That's awesome. All right, let me get everybody in the room. Come on in here, y'all. Get everybody in here. We got a lot to cover today. Get everybody in here. I think once we're in, I can disable the waiting room. That's what we'll do. Yep. While we're waiting for everybody to get connected and all of that good stuff, if you have particular questions about fundraising or grant writing that you have that you want to make sure that we get to today, drop it in the chat for me, and we'll look at those while we're presenting. Okay, so something that's on the top of your mind about grant writing, something that that you've always wanted to know, or question what something means. Like, here's the time to just, let's put it all on the table. Let's ask these questions. If you have any, just throw them in the chat. And we'll get started in 2 seconds here. How's everybody doing? Everybody okay? Thumbs up. Good. Everybody good? I see you're trying to connect, but I see you shaking your head. Shaki, thumbs up. Good. Naeem, I see you up there. Angela, thumbs up. Good, good, good. Everybody doing good. Should be changing seasons, so everybody stay safe. I had couple people as I was doing my calls today, couple people having COVID cases and flus, and so everybody stay safe and do what you got to do to take care of yourself and your family. Thanks for the thumbs up, Tish. Let's see if it's anybody. If you just join in, if you have any questions about grant writing or fundraising that you want to put in the chat, feel free to do that, and we can see those upcoming. But of course, if you want to get going and then you have questions, we'll do that too. Hey, Darius. Naeem still connecting. Give people 2 seconds. Galaxy SA, what's your name? I know your face, but what's your name? All right. David, what's going on, Mr. Valentine? You all right?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I feel like I haven't seen you in forever, and I used to see you almost every day.
Well, job and all of that requires my attention and home stuff. But I'm around.
Okay. How's the garden looking?
Oh, it's looking good.
Okay, cool. Good. Okay, I don't see any initial questions, so folks just want to probably just jump in. I think this might be the bulk of our group. I see a couple people still trying to connect, but I think we can jump right in. Has everybody had the pleasure of meeting Miss Ashley, who is KGD's fundraising expert? She leads our fundraising efforts. And so she's here to share a PowerPoint. And feel free to throw any questions that you have in the chat and I'll bring them up to her. You ready to get going? Ashley, how you feeling?
Feeling great.
Okay. All right. Let's just jump in. I think folks are ready. They got their pencils, paper.
Good. Yeah, Get your pencils ready. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. And now that I see who's joining us, like, I'm so excited to share this information with you. I have been doing fundraising in nonprofit settings, for 25 years probably. And I have seen a lot in 25 years and raised a lot of funds. The field is really changing right now, which I think is a really good thing. And I think it's really good for everybody. But I'll share a little bit about how I think it's changing along the way. Although it is changing, there are still quite a few fundamentals, and I'm happy to share those with you. But before I do, let me get into present mode actually. T, how's the screen look? Can you see the slides okay?
Looks good. Sorry, I have my thumbs up. You probably can't see it.
No. Okay, cool. Okay, so a little bit about Keep Growing Detroit and the way that we approach fundraising. As you all know, our mission is to really cultivate a food sovereign city where the majority of fruits and vegetables that Detroiters consume are grown by Detroiters for Detroiters within the city's limits. We really envision a future where Detroiters are the owners and beneficiaries of a transformed food system that really helps to bring community and economic development opportunities for residents of the city of Detroit. And we approach it in a way that is really distributive, meaning we're not trying to be a very large organization. We're a pretty small organization. We have 9 staff now. Our operating budget is between $750,000 and $800,000. There are lots of opportunities that we come across that we actually defer out into the community, which includes you guys. So like sometimes there are funding opportunities and they just aren't a good match. And we will always suggest one of our partners who we think is a better match. Sometimes there are media opportunities which turn into fundraising opportunities that aren't a good match for us. And we will always defer those opportunities to folks in the community, because we kind of see the work that we're doing as an ecosystem. And as gardeners, you know that a healthy ecosystem is, the trees, and as well it is the little microorganisms in the soil that communicate with the tree roots to make sure that, resources are being distributed. And in order to have a healthy food ecosystem, it's really important that we have large and small neighborhood-based citywide organizations that are all interconnected and really, really healthy. And a part of health is fiscal health. Excuse my dogs, they're very annoying. That's a little bit about how we approach funding. Just a few more things about fundraising at Keep Growing Detroit. We really try to cultivate a diverse pool of funding to make sure that we stay fiscally healthy. And many people don't realize that part of doing that is cultivating individual contributions and also earned revenue. And I'll explain a little bit more about kind of what those are in moving forward. But over 50% of our operating funds actually come from individuals and earned revenue, things that we sell, products we sell, or services that we sell. So we really do kind of practice what we preach. This workshop is a fund development grant, particularly focused on grant writing workshop, and it's part of a 3-part series. So I won't be going into budgeting at all today, because we're going to cover budgeting, in really in a lot of depth at the Open Book Finance an Open Book Management course, which is coming up. The date is at the last slide. We also have a crop planning class coming up this month. And so all of these, the idea is that these 3 kind of workshops together will help the gardens and farms that we serve, just start planning for their fiscal future, including the next growing season. So let's get started. I want to kind of share a little bit about Keep Growing Detroit's story. When we launched Keep Growing Detroit in 2013, we were responsible for the Garden Research Program and Grown in Detroit and, all the other programs that we maintain, but we didn't have any resources at all, no cash. If it weren't for our community, we wouldn't exist. We needed a roof over our heads, and a member of our community lent us a space for free for a year. We didn't have any money for salaries or paying people, and so many of our staff worked for as volunteers for months, and in some cases 6 months. We didn't have a copier for 2 years. We had to rely on friends and folks in our network to make all the Garden Resource Program copies for 2 years, as well as all the flyers. And we didn't even have any sort of office supplies. People literally cleaned out their desks at home and brought staplers and pads of paper and paper clips. And this, some of the office supplies in our office still have family names on them from GRP members who donated their office supplies to us. So we literally wouldn't exist at Keep Growing Detroit if it wasn't for our community. And I really like to start chats about raising funds with the idea of reciprocity, which is basically, the ancient, community exchange of I have a lot, maybe a specialty that I have cultivated over years, and you also have a lot. There's abundance, and you have specialties and things that you do and things that you have that you've cultivated over years. And sometimes I need what you have, and sometimes you need what I have. And through, a mutual aid or a mutual exchange, we can take care of each other. And so I just wanted to start with this little activity kind of focused on reciprocity, because if you can't identify who is in your network that you can both give to and draw from, you are going to be less successful, with all of the whole fundraising process. So let's just take a minute, 2 minutes, and think about you, your organization, your project, what you're trying to accomplish in the world, and identify at least 4, hopefully 8 entities, individuals, organizations, community-based institutions that you have a relationship with, that if you needed something that they have or needed to trade, you could do that. So let's do this for 2 minutes, and then hopefully 1 or 2 people will share.
I hope everybody got at least one on there. Starts with a K.
Okay, does anybody want to share one in the chat? Somebody that you could go to for something or exchange something with that is of value and can help you accomplish what you want to accomplish. Yes, we showed up.
What about like church groups or neighbors?
Yeah, like if you needed a meeting space, an indoor meeting space in the winter, who would open the doors to you? if you needed somebody to run some copies for you for some door-to-door flyering you wanted to do, who would you call? Yeah, definitely neighbors. Proximity. Okay, so we'll keep going. Okay, so one of the really important it's a barrier for some people to get over is in order to be successful in raising funds and resources for your organization, you're gonna have to do a little writing. Sorry. It's gonna require that you're able to really articulate very well and with enthusiasm a vision for what you want to do, and you're gonna need to articulate that vision both talking to people as well as on paper. And so this is an activity that I found has like really helped, particularly when trying to document your vision feels really overwhelming, or if you're really nervous about like the actual writing of things. This kind of helps you get out of your head. And it's adapted from the Power of Visioning, which is a workshop hosted by Zingerman's and Zing Train. And I think T's probably put the link in the chat box by now. So the activity basically is like pick a topic and time frame. This could be like, something that you want to accomplish in the next 3 months over the winter. And it could be something, much bigger that's and complicated that you want to try to accomplish over the next 15 years. Start with the achievements that you've got under your belt. Like all of us here, like I know most of the people who are in this session, and there are so many achievements that you all should be proud of. So think about and work on just writing down quickly the positive achievements that you've made that seem related to the thing that you've chosen as your topic. And then essentially give yourself 20 minutes using the hot pen method to complete a first draft of what your vision is. And essentially, like his advice is, be very descriptive. Like imagine yourself standing in the place in the moment that you've created when you're successfully implemented your vision, and describe what you see, who's there, what it feels like, what it sounds like. And basically don't stop writing for 20 minutes and don't judge yourself first and foremost. Like don't start reading it over, don't start judging yourself, don't start kind of self-sabotaging. So then, once you have your first kind of hot pen 20 minutes under your belt, your first draft, read it through and sleep on it. And then read it again and ask yourself if it sounds inspiring. If not, keep working on it. Lots of people find that when they do this activity, 90% of what they write down in that first 20 minutes is actually really good. It's just the 10% of like massaging that really needs, to go through multiple drafts. And then get input, ask people whose opinion you value to review your draft, and keep improving it until you get the clarity that you want and really feel like you've said what you mean to say. And then, once you kind of have articulated that vision, both, in a written form and you've practiced it, how to share it and engage stakeholders and see, if you can help get people excited about it. And then, of course, right, like none of us really want to do this work on our own. We all want to be, doing this work in community and see how that vision connects to people, that you want to work closely with or you want to partner with. So also think about how to make your vision smart. This is going to be really important down the road because people who are making decisions about grants and other funds really want to make sure that your ideas are grounded in reality and you've kind of thought through everything. So SMART is an acronym. It stands for specific. So provide a clear description of what you hope to achieve. make it measurable, include metrics that indicate success, achievable, so set a challenging target, but make sure it's within reach. Relevant, make sure you can articulate why you hope to achieve, why what you hope to achieve is worthwhile, what it will do for the community, for the world. And time bound, give yourself a deadline. Say when you think you'll have everything done and achieved by. Another thing to really consider are, what are your values? And by your, again, most of us are not doing this work alone. So we're talking about, like, what are your group values? What are your individual values? What do you bring to the group? And has your group had a discussion about who you are and what you stand for and what you can't support? I use this picture of bugs because many people, if they find a spider in their bed, some people will like walk it outside, and other people will not take a second thought at squashing it, right? Like it's kind of amazing how different people approach different things. And one way that you will find out how similar or different you are in a group is by starting the fundraising process. It could be very, very disruptive. And so let's use an example. Okay, so this is a scenario. This funder has contacted you. They read about you in the newspaper, and they think what you're doing is cool and similar to the kind of work that they want to support. It's Miracle-Gro, and they would like to offer you $5,000 to support your work. And the only catch is that you must put up a 1 foot by 2 foot sign that says, "This garden is supported by Miracle-Gro." So we've got a poll for you. What would you say?
That should read, would you pursue this funding opportunity? Heck to the no, maybe, heck to the yes. All right, I think we got it. I think we got everybody in there.
Okay, let's see the results.
Can you see it? I'm sorry.
I can't see the results. Maybe I should stop share.
Okay, I can see it. I think. Okay, can you see it when you stop share?
No, but what could you tell us? What were the results?
Yeah, that's weird. I'll read it out. 40% said hell no. 40% said maybe. And 20% said hell to the yes.
So I rest my case. This is a real example. Miracle-Gro actually contacted Keep Growing Detroit and wanted to give us funding, and the co-directors discussed it, and we said hell no, hell to the no. And instead of accepting the funding or offending the funder to say hell no, we actually called around to other organizations that we partner with to see who was the hell yes. And actually one of our partners received the funding. So a real life example that illustrates essentially how important it is to be on the same page, because if you're not, and somebody says hell yes, and then you're kind of stuck in the agreement, it could be really damaging.
Angela said this is a true struggle for her.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah.
That comes up a little bit often.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely does. Like some people have said to me, like all money is bad money, and so I'm gonna take it because I'm operating in a capitalist system. But I believe that there's some things that kind of undo the progress that you make in life, and you shouldn't shouldn't help them undo that progress. So another question to be asking yourself and your group is, what's your capacity? You know, your ability to plan and carry out projects successfully. Many people jump, you know, when they hear the word capacity, they jump right to like the big things, you know, like we have, you know, we have a building, we have a big staff, we have a couple trucks, you know, we have a lot of resources, but particularly in the funding age that we're in, there's like a real emphasis on lived experience and social capital. So if you can speak from the heart with a lot of authenticity about what you want to do and where you want to do it, it's super, super powerful. So do not underestimate the power of lived experience. And then, you know, social capital is so valuable. You know, who you know, how deep is the relationship, how trusting is the relationship, is really, really important. And there's all sorts of science that supports that. That even if you have a lot of acquaintances and you know, not even super like deep connections to things, through acquaintances, you will be connected to opportunities and resources. So always be kind of thinking about your capacity, and be really careful about not overextending yourself when you're pursuing funding opportunities. You can get yourself kind of in a situation that you're not completely prepared for, and sometimes, you know, like a little bit of a challenge is a really good thing, but sometimes it can actually be the end of a good thing. And I'll use an example of what I mean by that in a little bit.
Can you share some examples of like how you would demonstrate that social capital? Like, I'm thinking like Instagram followers, or like number of volunteers who came to your farm, or can you share some like tangible ways that shows up when you're writing?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I'm a nerd. He knows I'm a nerd. Most of you know I'm a nerd. So like, there's this evolving science called network science. And so there's a ton of research that basically looked at like two characteristics, like productivity and then network. And essentially, they wanted to know, what was a bigger factor in success? Was it productivity or was it your network? And they found that like in some cases, like if you're a basketball player, and you're super productive, you're the star scorer, then you're going to be very successful. But in almost all other cases where there's nuance, like art, for example, people with the most social connections were actually the most successful. So for example, two artists, one in Kansas and one in New York City. The artist in Kansas could be like far superior to the artist in New York City, but because of the social network opportunities in New York City, the New York artist is always more successful. So it's like a proven fact that like, cultivating relationships with people and having a big social network is really, really powerful. And the best example of a social network that I can imagine leveraging is your KGD family, right? Like, think about how many people you're connected through classes, through seed and plant distributions, through volunteering. The more active you are, the more active in activating those relationships, the more successful you will be. Does that help, T?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great. So the other thing to be careful about and conscious about is, what's your process related to fund development? So we're going to go through many of these steps. So don't think too much about the steps, but like the steps include project planning, right? Determining your goals, your activities, your timeline. Who on your team is doing that? Is it one person? Is it a group? Budgeting, figuring out what you need and how much it costs. Is there, who in your team or multiple people in your team are responsible for budgeting? Prospect research, finding potential revenue sources and developing a strategy and making decisions, frankly, about when to pursue them. Applying for funds. So putting your budget details together in the funder's required format. fund management, implementing your project activities, for the things that you were awarded to do according to the plan, documenting everything. So like, ask yourself, are you ready to pursue funding? And if you are, then you could think about all of these things and be like, oh, I have clarity on who in my group can apply for funds. I have clarity on who in my group is involved in the budgeting process. And if you don't have clarity on that stuff, you need to figure out how to get clarity on that stuff, because this is another pitfall where you have a really successful group that you've kind of nurtured for a year, and there's so many good things coming. You have such a, so much lived experience, so much social capital, that opportunities are coming your way. And all of a sudden, everybody in your group are applying for things that you don't even know about, and sometimes getting them. And it's crazy. So T is shaking her head because maybe she's had this experience before.
Yes, I am. Yes, and then your kind of your integrity as an organization is on the hook for for things that you may not know about.
So I just thought I would share a couple of KGD examples, right? Because like we worked really hard to figure out like how to operationalize this stuff in our organization, in a way that tries to include as many people as possible, particularly those people who are on the front lines, really know the most about things in important ways. So the first is our project plan template. So we actually do this in real life. Those of you that are familiar with our inner workings know that like this time of year we like get super focused on project planning for the upcoming year, and essentially we write our project plan title, and on my team, Grown in Detroit, time frame is the 2022. Project description would be like, we want to provide an opportunity for growers to sell, help train them, help get healthy produce out in the community, list relevant SOPs or standard operating procedures. So I'm going to go over those in a second, but an example of a standard operating procedure at Grown in Detroit would be, how to use a gardener market log. Annual goals, so how many growers we want to involve, how much produce we want to sell, how many markets we want to staff, annual improvement details, which really help kind of hone in on like, a program like Grown in Detroit is really old, and there's a lot that works about it, but sometimes there are, some things that we figure we want to improve or aren't working anymore, and we want to like focus in on how to improve those details. A timeline, to kind of figure out, okay, how do we operationalize this? And then any supporting documents, like if we update the gardener market log, or, we update the new market orientation documents, we include all that.
Can I just emphasize with that piece, because I think it's important to know that like, at least at KGD, and ideally, within your organization or for your individual self, like you have a plan for your year that's, independent. Like we'll write a plan for Grown in Detroit before it's even funded, right? Like we have a plan for it, and then we try to match the funding to the plan. I think a lot of times organizations do the opposite, where they see a grant and then they try to make a plan for the grant, as opposed to like, really thinking through what you want to do as an organization, and then finding something to match that, basically. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah,
when you're on this
for that, Pete. That's super, super important. You got to have that. It all starts with, what you want to accomplish, and being, and really kind of sitting with it and honing what you want to accomplish, operationalizing it. And then honestly, like, most funders, they can, they'll read a proposal and they'll know who's done the work to figure out, the plan and who hasn't. So standard operating procedures are also pretty important at Keep Growing Detroit. I shared this because this is a perfect example of like a format you could use if you wanted to create a procedure for how you pursue fundraising opportunities. So the purpose could be to raise funds for the organization. The person's responsible, it's usually a team of people. Procedures, chronological order would be, like one is, how do you pursue opportunity? How do you find and pursue opportunities? So proactive and then reactive when opportunities come to you. How do you field them? The process to train your staff or the people in your group so that they are aware of what the process is. You have new people coming into the group all the time. And when you have something like a standard operating procedure written down, you can just share it with folks. And it's like really easy to help kind of onboard them and train them, compared to if it's like a game of telephone and you don't have that kind of supporting documents. And then finally, what happens when you actually get a grant. Sometimes you don't think about that so much. And frankly, this is the newer of the 3 documents for Keep Growing Detroit. When we get a new grant, we do a grant huddle. We assemble everybody who is, affected by the grant, who runs programs where the grant is referenced. We share a little bit about the funder so they know where the funds are coming from, the project period. So when the project starts, when it ends, if there are, any milestones, total amount awarded, reporting requirements. So like sometimes grants require progress reports, interim reports, annual reports. So those are all detailed in grant agreements typically. And so we make sure we get those in the calendar and make it clear who's responsible for what aspects of reporting, what data needs to be collected, because we go over the activities and the deliverables. So we know, in the case of Grown in Detroit, that we have to have so many markets, so many trainings, as an example. The budget, so what are the resources paying for exactly? This helps empower people responsible for aspects of the work to be able to make decisions about what supplies to get, what supplies to wait for, and then next steps and assignments. So these are 3 actual processes that Keep Growing Detroit uses to kind of make it really clear and inclusive, the whole fundraising process. Okay, getting into it. Types of funds. So we have loans. So any entity type. Entity means it's a business entity. So entity could be for profit, not for profit. It could be some sort of hybrid business model. But all entity types are eligible for loans. There are numerous low interest or no interest loan options, and even some forgivable loans. So basically a forgivable loan is you get a loan to do X, Y, and Z. And then once you successfully do X, Y, and Z, you apply for forgiveness and the loan is wiped out. Then there's also everything in between. So good pro tips to kind of look at loans, like your traditional bank is going to be challenging for a number of reasons. The 2 biggest would be that the interest rate tends to be a little high, and the amount that banks are interested in lending people tends to be pretty high. So if you need a $5,000 loan or $10,000 loan, most banks won't talk to you. But a CDFI, the one that I have a relationship with, is called Anchor Bank out of Toledo. It's like a nonprofit lender, a nonprofit bank. So they have all sorts of loan products and loan services that really make it more accessible for small organizations. Kiva, and there is a Kiva. Detroit has loan products that are kind of smaller and zero interest, and USDA has a number of loan products. Earned revenue, gardens and farms can earn money selling produce, merchandise, hosting events. The pro tip is to make sure that the earned revenue opportunities align with your mission. And this is the same for for-profit and not-for-profit entities. Doing earned revenue work that kind of takes you away from your center is just going to be distracting. But earned revenue is amazing because, you know, like you, if you find something that works, right, meaning that the time that it takes and the inputs that it takes, you know, has a big return on profit. If you find something that works, it can be a really great, you know, source of funding for you that you control. That's like, when you look at all these other options, the only one that you control is earned revenue.
There's often a question I get about about this as it relates to nonprofits, and like how much a lot of people think nonprofits, oh, I can't make money because I'm a nonprofit. Like, can you talk about
Yeah.
that a little bit?
Yeah. So if you are a nonprofit, you can absolutely earn revenue, but it must be mission related. So you can't, you know, you can't. An uncle has a that he, you know, whole truck full, and he's willing to sell you for 50, you know, 50 cents on the dollar, and so you could turn around quickly. Like, it must be mission related earned revenue. And if it is, there's a lot of products like merchandise that is taxable. So if you're actually doing something that is you know, wouldn't be selling a t-shirt is not mission related revenue, and t-shirts are taxable, so you must pay taxes on them. So selling vegetables is, you know, for us mission related, and vegetables you know, don't have any sales tax. So so you have to be careful about mission related. You have to be careful about what's taxable. And then if it becomes like a really, really large portion of your revenue, you want to consult a tax professional to make sure that you're doing everything above board.
Okay. You had a question in the chat about bank loans. You want to answer that now, or you want to get through this slide? But
if our bank loan will not give out $10,000 or less, should we apply bank? Yeah, so I don't think you should take out any amount of loan that is more than what you need. So you need to find a loan product that matches what you need. And like I said, CDFIs and Kiva, and there's another product called Steward, which focuses on like regenerative agriculture. You know, get in touch with us. We can help you be connected to a loan product that is more along the lines of what you're looking for. When thinking about mission related things, would hosting a fundraiser where there is a prize, such as a t-shirt raffle, apply to the idea of earned revenue to be affected by taxes? Yeah. And there's this really good, a really good service called Rally Up. That is so, I mean, the bad thing about these online services is that they take a percentage of your earnings, but the good thing is that they make you know, online interactions look really slick, and you know, sometimes it's just worth paying 3% for the hassle that it saves you. So Rally Up is a tool that helps you do online raffles, and its job is raffles, and so it's really, really good at the legalities of raffles, which there are a lot of. So business and individual and business donations, this could be from individual donors, and this could be from crowdfunding sources. So crowdfunding are things like GoFundMe, for example. Again, this is an opportunity for any entity type, with the exception of if the donor requires a donation receipt, you have to be a 501c3, but how many of us, let's just be real, how many of us have given money to a GoFundMe page or, you know, a community effort that is not a nonprofit organization and didn't care at all that we didn't get a donation receipt, right? Like, so again, the time is changing. So it's a great way to raise money and also in kind time and resources. We're going to talk about that first in a second. Then here, this is where it starts to get more complicated, this bottom row. We have family, private, and community foundations. So foundations vary in size and scope. Most have trustees that determine the direction and make the decision. So family foundations are typically, the trustees are members of the family or like trusted confidants of the family. They tend to be smaller than private foundations, but that's not always the case. They tend to be invite only, but sometimes they have application processes. It's really like just like there are no, like every single one of your gardens and farms is totally different from the next one. The same could be said about, you know, all these foundation types. So you just kind of got to get to know them. Private foundations tend to be a little larger. They're run more like businesses rather than like a kind of family project. They usually have staff that prepare, that put out requests for proposals. We're going to go over that in a second. And then, you know, go through all the proposals and, you know, figure out how to pitch them to trustees, you know, and are available to help folks with that have inquiries kind of navigate the process. And then community foundations are, you know, basically every major city in America has a community foundation, and community foundations are they're kind of like Rally Up, frankly. They're essentially, if you don't want to go through the hassle of running your own family foundation, you can basically work with a community foundation, and they'll provide all like the professional services to like get the funds out, and you know, you can set the direction of what you want your funds to be used for. So at a community foundation, it's kind of like a one-stop shop. You know, there's tons of little and even mid-size and large pools of funds, and the program officer will help you kind of figure out if there's any good matches within a larger portfolio of funds. Corporate foundations. So the thing about corporations is that the money could be coming from a foundation, you know, which again, really is it varies widely between like how large and how professional it is. But funds can also be coming from the marketing end of the corporation. And those funds tend to be a little less formal than the corporate, you know, through the foundation. So you can, if you have a corporate partner, sometimes you can get funds through their giving programs, and sometimes you can get funds through their marketing programs. You know, and the route in is just a little different. The giving priorities for corporations usually align with their corporate interest. And if it's a rare situation and the corporation is still family or community owned, a lot of times the corporate giving has to do with that families. It's a lot like a family foundation. It's the family priorities. And then last but not least, there are government contracts. So there are lots of local, so City of Detroit, state and federal entities that have grant and loan programs to advance public priorities. And you know, the good thing about these is that they, you know, you can get on, you can get familiar with websites or get on even mailing lists to kind of be notified, because there's a public notification process for all the grant opportunities because it's public money. So you can kind of stay in touch with what's available. But the bad news is these tend to be like the really, really complicated proposals that require lots and lots of reporting.
This may be the slide that, just to pause really quickly, in the beginning, Angela was mentioning she was kind of struggling with the idea of whether she should start a nonprofit or not. And I don't know, if maybe this is a good time to just have a quick chat about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we're gonna have a slide that features eligibility. I think it's the next one. We'll cover it at that slide.
Okay, and then Tish had one more question in there regarding prizes and fundraisers.
Okay, if you get a donation of items, would it be better to offer those items as a prize or sell them as part of fundraiser proceeds? You can't sell donations. So if something is donated to you, you generally shouldn't sell them back. Does that make sense? So hopefully that answers that. Okay, so next thing I wanted to cover, because I mentioned it in the previous slide related to individuals, is in-kind contributions. So in-kind contributions are donations of goods, services, or time instead of cash. The folks doing in-kind contributions are typically individuals or businesses. So there's two big kinds of in-kind. One is in-kind time or services. This is not tax deductible, but it does have value, particularly when you're thinking about your capacity. In 2021, an hour of volunteer time in Michigan was valued at $26.93. And that's basically like what they do is they look at like the average of a bunch of professions, and then they take the mean. So like a lawyer may be valued at $150 per hour, and a transportation provider might be valued at less, and so they kind of push, meld everything together, and they for 2021 came up with $26.93, which is the value. You can just do a quick Google search every year to get the updated number. This is recognized by funders as legitimate, and so if you are trying to demonstrate your capacity, you can, and you have a lot of volunteers, you can keep track of the volunteer time, and you can say, our organization hosted 1,000 volunteers in 2021, and the total value of that 1,000 times 2 hours each times $26.93 is huge, right? In-kind goods are, the food you get at Meijer, donated for an event that they want to support, or the tiller that the hardware store donated to the organization. So these are tax deductible if the donor would like a tax deduction. So this is like where you just you got to know the rules, and you got to just have a conversation. So the fair market value for donated in-kind goods is tax deductible, but many donors don't donate for the write-off, right? They don't care. They don't plan to use it in their taxes. They just want it to go to something that they believe in. So make sure you're clear about the donor's expectations before you accept the donation. So next up, we have restricted funding and unrestricted funding. So part of fundraising, and getting kind of familiar with it is just like learning this whole vocabulary. That's like super, super important. And this is one of the most important set of words that you will find. So restricted funding are grants or donations that require that the funds be used in a specific way for a specific purpose. The arrangement is generally considered a contract between the donating party and the receiving party. So grants are not free money, it turns out. Grants are actually just like you're kind of bidding for a contract as a for-profit organization. You're basically saying you're going to do X, Y, and Z by June, and it's going to cost $500. And you need to be able to do X, Y, and Z by June for $500, or you're in breach of the contract. Unrestricted funding are the best. And this is another way that funding is sort of changing these days. There are more foundations and folks in philanthropy that they talk about systemic change, right? And like fixing the problems, not just putting band-aids on it. And then they give us restricted funding where our hands are tied, and and it's only a year-long grant, and systemic change doesn't work like that. So unrestricted funding is definitely on the rise. It's still a bit of a unicorn, really hard to get, particularly right out of the gate. Sometimes you're better positioned for unrestricted funding if you have a trusting relationship with a funder. But unrestricted funding are grants, loans, donations, and earned income that may be spent as the organization needs or sees fit with no restrictions. So again, the days of like the only entity that could receive grants or donations is a nonprofit are over. More and more funders recognize that, again, there are businesses who do really, really, really good things in the community and nonprofits that do a lot of harm. And so they're more flexible, and you just got to pay really close attention about which funder requires what entity choice. We're going to get into that again in a second.
Question in the chat for you on that from Angela.
Is it also true that grant funding sometimes does not allow you to use the money for administrative work, which is what many, yeah, definitely. There are lots of grants that don't, that love to give away money for supplies. But the minute you ask for money to pay a salary or to pay your utility bills, they're all of a sudden not interested in your work. And that is why you must be good at, a funding recipe that includes all the parts, or many of the parts of the types of funding that we went over in a couple of slides ago. Reimbursement-based funding. So this is super, super important too. This basically means when a business has to spend the money before invoicing for the goods or services produced and is required to submit receipts as proof of that spending in order to be reimbursed. Payment could take weeks, months, or longer. Many, many federal grants are reimbursement-based. And I will never forget my first experience with a reimbursement-based grant. I was in my early 20s and I was leading urban gardening work for the Bog Center in Detroit Summer. And we had a celebratory moment when we got some funds for the first time from the city of Detroit to support the work, and then realized that the funds were reimbursement based, and we had to basically figure out how to cash flow like tens of thousands of dollars that we didn't have. I believe that Detroit Summer would have been around for a lot longer than it was if it never would have gotten a reimbursement-based grant. So be really careful with this one, guys. Okay, now we get to eligibility. So T's gonna drop this link in the chat box. I think that this is one of the kind of most underutilized resources on the KGD website. It is the Good Food Legal Handbook that we co-wrote with Nick Leonard from the Great Lakes Environmental Law Center. Essentially, this handbook goes through every single entity choice: LLC, corporation, B Corp. I don't know if it covers cooperatives. It should have. Maybe we should update it. And nonprofit organizations. It basically has pros and cons for each, right? Like a pro for a for-profit business is that you own your business. If your business acquires equity because you work your butt off, you gain equity. You are also, the decision maker of your business. In a nonprofit, you may be eligible for more grants, but the equity that's built up in the business is attributed to the business, and it doesn't stay with the person that helped, cultivate that equity. Also, the governance is a board of directors, and the board of directors could, decide at any moment, right, to change direction with leadership or anything, right? So there's some real things to consider. And particularly with the changing funding landscape, and the idea of like meaningful collaboration between business and nonprofits. There's just a lot of kind of opportunities unfolding, and you don't have to be kind of a one size fits all thing anymore. So
another big one in that list of things about nonprofits that a lot of people don't realize, that as a nonprofit, when you dissolve, your assets need to go to another nonprofit. You can't make a profit off of your assets after if you need to dissolve. It's just another point.
yeah.
And before we go too far, Tish was asking, is reimbursement based the same as matching funds grants? I don't know if you can reiterate that.
No, matching funds we're definitely going to get into, but just not in depth in any slides. So I'll just say now, some grants require matching funds in order to be eligible for them. So they'll typically it's a 1-to-1 match. So if you apply for $5, you need to basically have raised $5 other from another funder, or earned revenue or whatever. Sometimes in-kind materials can be used for match. You just gotta read the details carefully, and this is where that kind of in-kind time comes in. If a funder requires a match and the match can be in kind and you have lots of volunteer hours, it's no problem whatsoever to meet the match. But if you're applying for $10,000 and it requires, a 1-to-1 match, then you have to have $10,000 already raised before you can even be eligible. So that's important. Thank you, Tish. Okay, so essentially, again, funders want to support impactful strategies, impactful people, impactful organizations, and those come in all sorts of entity types. So use that guide to kind of, help you figure out which entity type feels good to you. It also includes like the process for applying for the entity type that you choose, as well as some maintenance tips, because not only is there a process to apply to be an entity, both in the state that you're in and typically to the federal government, there's maintenance, right? You got to pay, you got to do tax forms every year. You got to file paperwork with the state of Michigan every year. Just to kind of give you a sense of nonprofit organizations, the federal form, you have to apply for an EIN and then submit your articles of incorporation in the state of Michigan and wait until all that gets sorted out. The fees are pretty nominal for the state. Then you have to do Form 1023, which is a whopper of an application. And then I think the fee as of late was like $600 to $1,000 just to apply to become a 501c3. And then it could take months to get an approval, and then you're on the hook, right, to do a 990 every year. And in some cases, you can be a nonprofit, and you can't go for big funds unless you have an audit, and an audit costs about $10,000 a year. So you have to put in a lot of work to be kind of a nonprofit organization that is eligible for kind of larger funds. So when you are considering funding, you want to be very clear what kind of entity type will they take applications from. Oftentimes funders are very geographic specific, or working with a specific community. And so you got to make sure that you're a match for the geographic requirements, or the specific community requirements. Sometimes the operating budget, the size of the organization, many funders will say, we won't fund anybody with an operating budget over $1 million or over $500,000. And many funders will say, we won't support organizations without operating budgets under $1 million. So typically there is some assumptions with funders that like you couldn't have gotten to a size of organization, like $1 million unless you had some real strong practices. And so they're kind of, the trust level increases with the size of organization, but I don't know about you, that hasn't been my experience all the time. But that's just kind of how it works. Many funders also are have requirements for basic financial documents. So they require an audit or audited financial statements, or they want to see a copy of your Form 990, which is a tax form that nonprofits do every year. So this is another really important word that I think is really kind of key to that that ability to kind of make the new funding scenario work, where businesses and nonprofits can work together. It's the fiscal sponsor or fiduciary. If a funder requires 501c3 status and or an audit, but you don't have either, you can typically apply with a fiduciary. Pro tip is to choose your fiduciary wisely. Make sure that your mission and their mission are aligned, and that they are fiscally responsible, that you trust them, that the community trusts them, and that you work out details about how implementation will work before you apply. So I just did a quick Google search on fiduciary agreement templates, and there were a number of them that came up. So if you have questions about like what would be in a document that laid out kind of roles and responsibilities, with a fiduciary, there are lots of templates online. And an example, T's going to drop this in the chat, but an example of like getting some practice working with a fiduciary is IOB Detroit. So IOB is a crowdfunding platform that wants to support really innovative projects, community-based organizations doing good work that don't have 501c3 status can apply. Can launch campaigns on IOB. Not only will they be your fiscal sponsor, they actually have professional staff that will work with you to develop the campaign, which is a really good capacity building opportunity.
Can I just say one thing about the fiduciary that wasn't in there?
Yeah.
And notice was the oftentimes they'll request a percentage of the grant that you take through them. So somewhere between 5 and 10% is, I think, customary for that service.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And that's because they have they have accountants that they need to pay to like write checks and all that good stuff. It's reasonable. If someone that you really, really trust and think is a good fit asks for 5 or 10%, I wouldn't bat an eye unless you think it makes you less competitive with whatever funder that you're applying for. Okay, so getting into it, prospect research. So prospect research, right, is like that step in the process where you're like, okay, I know what my vision is and what I want to accomplish. I feel so passionate about it. I've really articulated it both verbally and in a written form. My group has reviewed it. We're all on the same page. We translated it into a nice budget, which if you're interested in budgeting, which is so important in the process, I'd highly recommend the next class. I'm not going to talk about it today because I won't have time. The next thing, right? You know what you want to do and how much it's going to cost. You need to start looking for, you need a fundraising plan, right? And so a fundraising plan could include, okay, how am I going to earn money? How am I going to, get those individual donations? It should include those things because again, those are the most reliable and both of them are unrestricted, right? So when you earn revenue, it's unrestricted. And when you get individual donations, generally they're unrestricted. So you can do whatever you want with them, keep them or spend them. It's your choice. And they're usually based on like things you can control, like earned revenue, you're doing the work, you're putting in the effort, and individual donations is typically coming from your community, right? So make sure that that's part of your plan. But then if you need to go beyond that, and you need to start looking at various foundations or government contracts, we're going to look are things, these are really good tips, actually. So one of the more underutilized resources in our community, the library. So when I was training, Danielle, our fundraising support person, we made a whole day trip to the library. There's a couple of floors in the main branch that have various directories that really, really big nonprofit organizations pay hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars to get every single year, that are available at the library. And the librarians are generally so helpful and have time to help you figure out like, where are they located, so that's, don't disregard that opportunity. There's also www.grants.gov. Again, typically all local, state, and federal funding has a required posting process, and all the federal grants can be found on that website. Of course, you can do web searches, make them as specific as possible. One day, I just did #garden grants in Instagram, and there was like, numerous opportunities right there. The Foundation Center is kind of a one-stop shop for various foundations. I think it is a paid resource at this point, but GrantWatch is not, grantwatch.com, and GuideStar is not as well. So all of those places, you'll be overwhelmed. I mean, it's kind of hard. There are thousands and thousands and thousands. So you really need to know what you're looking for. You're looking for matches, right? Like, what you want to do, your vision, you need a match. So you're going to be looking at the funder name and contact, what they fund, the eligibility requirements, the deadlines, and the previous awardees, both what they awarded as well as how much they awarded. And we included this prospect research example. I think T probably shared it in the chat by now. It's got something like 26 examples of prospects that are actually, we just checked them. All the links are working. They're all up to date. They're all real. We call it kind of behind the scenes, the treasure map for you guys. When you do the work of, going into all of these websites, going to the library, looking through these thousands and thousands of various opportunities to see if they're a fit, right? Put them in a document like this prospect research example, and kind of build a base that you can kind of, anytime you hear about something, you can drop it in. And when you start, when you have a new project or you're kind of looking for new funding, you can go back to the list, and it'll be there, and you don't have to do you don't have to start from start. Okay, request for proposals. So typically funders, especially big funders, have a request for proposal process. If they don't, they may say invite only. The next slide is going to help you if you get into that situation. But for now, we'll stick with what most foundations and funders do, which is a request for proposals and RFP process. So essentially, you can get on funders' websites and their on their mailing list, and all the requests for proposals will kind of be in those mailing lists. You'll click on them, and they'll basically they'll have a detail for what the purpose for the new pot of money is. They'll say how much money is available in the pot, and they'll also say like accepting proposals in the range of like $10,000 to $100,000 or $10,000 to $50,000. So you'll see that they're giving away $100,000 and that the range of funding is $10,000 to $50,000. So that tells you a lot of information there. It tells you that it could be two people that they're going to fund when everything is said and done. And that's not very many. So the next thing you want to think about is, are they a local foundation or are they a national foundation? If it's a national foundation that did a big kind of advertisement for a new RFP and the total amount of funding is $50,000 or $100,000 and the maximum award is 50,000, it's going to be highly, highly, highly competitive. And you may want to look at it to say, how much time is this going to take? Because I have a 1 in 1,000 chance of getting it. There's a lot of kind of, if you read between the lines, a lot of information in RFPs. The next thing is going to be the eligibility requirements, right? Like that's going to tell you the entity choice, the size of the organization, the operating budget, if it requires, what financial documents it requires. It's going to give you key dates. Oftentimes there's a ton of dates. There's like RFP is shared on this day. There's an information session or 2 on these days. If they do offer information sessions and you can go, I'd recommend that you go. It's a good capacity building opportunity and you could start building a relationship with the funder at that point. It also will have the deadline for the application and it'll have typically the date that awardees will be notified. So that'll really help you with your planning. It'll have the proposal requirements. So you should be able to kind of click and see what questions need to be answered. And if there are any word or character limits. Let me tell you, this is the number one thing that's changed over the last 25 years with funding is that, even 5 years ago, funders had a boilerplate proposal that they almost all asked the same questions in the same format, and you could recycle things that you wrote for one for another pretty easily. But today, it's like really no one size fits all at all. Some have some you can submit PDFs through an email. Some require that you mail in 2 copies, hard copies. Some are electronic submissions, and then some are like really wackadoodle online submissions that are like, tell me what you want to do in 2,000 words, or send in a video, and it's just all over the place. There's really no one size fits all anymore. So definitely you want to look into like the questions that need to be answered, and 100% you want to understand if there are word or character limits, because if you have written something that's 2,000 character or 2,000 words and you need to get it down to 2,000 characters, it takes so much effort to translate, and move things around. You'll also want to know what are the required attachments, because not only do you need to have enough time to get the proposal the questions that need to be answered done and through your process and turned in on time, you also need to get the required attachments turned in on time. So if it requires letter of support and it's due tomorrow and you just figured out that it needs a letter of support, it might be too late. If it requires an audit and you're 3 months away from your audit and it's due in a month, you might be too late. So you really want to understand what those required attachments are. It also sometimes, I would say 50-50 chance, include some sort of scoring criteria in an effort to kind of be fair, to kind of give people really clear direction as to like what they're looking for in a proposal. Sometimes that's just more confusing than it is helpful, but do pay attention to the things that they're looking for and give them what they're looking for. And you will not get extra points for being like an out of the box thinker when you're applying for most grants. So if there's no RFP process, for things like the small family foundations that I was talking about earlier, there's typically your way in is a letter of intent or a letter of inquiry. So it's usually some sort of brief introduction to your organization and a little bit about the project that you're seeking support from. It's kind of like a formal formal letter, introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about what you do and what you're seeking funding for. Sometimes if the funder expressly says, if you're interested in funding, submit a letter of inquiry, then you're gonna, there's a very high chance that you're gonna get a response back, either way. Sometimes the response is like, great, we think that you're a good match, do a full proposal. Sometimes the response is, you're exactly who we're looking for, a full proposal is not even necessary. And sometimes the response back is just going to be like, thanks, but no thanks. Sometimes if a funder says by invitation only, a letter of inquiry is the only way that you can kind of get your foot in the door. And in my experience, it rarely works. The more effective thing is to try to figure out, like, who do you know that knows somebody there, or how can you get in front of them some other way? It's typically a long job.
Just had a question earlier about, and this I knew it was kind of coming up in some of your slides here, but kind of that pitch idea, if you want to scroll up a little bit, she was saying, just having that ability to talk face to face with a funder, or that conversation. Any tips on how to make your pitch or how to cultivate yourself in that way?
Yeah. Actually, we're at this slide right now, so it's good timing. Cultivating funder relationships. So here's my I didn't say earlier that social capital is the most important, type of capital earlier, because I said it because I mean it, and it also applies to funding relationships. So definitely do put in the work to build relationships with potential funders, even if it may take 5 years to turn into an actual exchange of money. So program officers generally welcome questions, and it's a great way to start a relationship. So typically, right, there'll be an RFP process. You'll read the RFP, something will be unclear, and it's a great way to, introduce yourself to call and try to get on their schedule, or send an email, or go to one of the informational sessions and ask your question. But 100% be prepared for the conversation, and don't ask questions that are clearly answered in the RFP or on their website. You have to, there's still a power dynamic and a professionalism, kind of standard that you need to start from a very kind of formal, prepared stance. And then as you kind of feel the person out, you can kind of relax and be a little more conversational and informal. But start assuming that they're very that they set very professional boundaries, and and then work from there. Other advice is that foundations are really similar to other organizations and businesses, and you need to navigate accordingly. And what I mean by that is program officers or trustees, if you're lucky enough to kind of get in front of them and start forming a relationship with them, that's great. But there's also kind of grant management people and administrative folks that are working really hard behind the scenes, and those people are actually sometimes the most important relationships that you're going to have at a foundation. And oftentimes, just like any other business, people are cultivating interns or people in supportive roles for leadership roles. And I've seen foundations where someone who started out as an intern now controls huge portfolios of money. So always, it's I shouldn't have to say this out loud, right? But always be courteous, mindful of interactions with every single person in the organization. And also don't put your eggs in one basket, because there's also a lot of turnover at foundations, particularly when there's a new president or new leadership. There's often a big kind of turnover or reorganization or kind of reassessment of the direction, and you got to be prepared for anything. Does that help, Tish? Okay. I'm going to keep going. Common proposal elements. So as I said earlier, funding really is changing, and particularly during COVID, funders have kind of relaxed a little bit with like the other day we submitted something and Danielle was like, damn, this is like a dissertation. Like it was, like 26 pages of like thesis statements and, crazy. So there still is that, but there's also, some really kind of short and quick proposals that don't have as many of these parts. But what I would recommend is that as you kind of, I'm not a fan of doing work you don't need to do, but I do think a level of preparedness is having something written for each of these sections, so that if and when you need them, they could be tweaked or updated. Downsize or upsize for character limits. And so the first would be obviously an organization description, right? So like imagine anywhere from a paragraph to like a page and a half where you're describing your mission, your vision, your history, your track record, your capacity. Then the need being addressed. So this, I would recommend get to know kind of the culture of the foundation and what if you kind of look at who they funded before, what they funded, even the way they write themselves or how formal they present information, you can kind of it tells a lot. But I would recommend that I'm not a fan of poverty pimping or focusing on the negative. I like to focus on the assets in our community. There are problems for sure, but there are also assets and innovative solutions and innovative people and resilient people. And so I like to kind of write a need statement or kind of the challenge statement in a way that like like that clearly says what the issue is, that provides research substantiating the issue. The better, the more local, the better. So like an example of that would be, hunger globally is very different. I mean, it's not too different actually than hunger in Michigan. But if you can speak more to hunger in Michigan rather than to hunger globally, and even better, hunger in Detroit, then it helps to really kind of hit home and substantiate the need being addressed. But also, again, talk about the abundance and the resilience here. Then you'll need to have like that project description, make it super smart, super clear, right? Like you want to start a garden and you want, as part of that starting a garden, you want to do five 4x8 raised beds, an irrigation station, and an orchard, right? And the raised beds will be in place by April to align with the cold crop distribution at Keep Growing Detroit. The fruit trees will be planted by May after you receive them at the KGD plant sale, and then the irrigation station will be, in by the rainy fall season. Implementation plan, right? The action steps, community collaboration. This is really, really, some funders, it's a must. They will not consider any application unless it's clear how you're connected to other people and other efforts, particularly those that they fund or, that they support. And then some funders, they don't really care about collaboration. They're not thinking about it. But I think it's always, even if it's not a required section, be ready to talk about the ways that you collaborate with people. An evaluation plan. So how do you know that the raised beds have been successfully implemented? How do you know that they're working to decrease hunger? And how do you know, that the irrigation station is positively impacting the environment? Then the budget. So typically the funder will require a project budget, sometimes a project budget and operating budget. And then there's an acknowledgement that sometimes projects are really big, like they require, the garden research program costs $240,000 to operate. And a lot of times, I don't think we've ever had one funder, right, that just ponies up $240,000 in 1 year. So oftentimes we're submitting budgets for like 50,000 of that or 10,000 of that. And we're showing how, how we're making the other funding happening. So there's a project budget and then there's a project request. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm not going to really talk too much more about budgets because I want you to go to the next class. T, are there any questions that are time sensitive that I should take right now?
Not really. We're just chatting, and I was just about to respond to Brenda and Angela.
cool.
They're looking for maybe some more specific like workshops around like getting that writing out, and recommendations on that. I was just typing a response, but we could talk about it a little bit.
Okay. Well, I'll keep going and maybe we can talk more about that at the end.
Okay.
Okay, common attachments. So in addition to the main kind of grant application or proposal, most applications have attachments as well. And so the first would be an audited financial statement, or it could be an operating budget, or it could be an unaudited financial statement. And if you can't write like that, think of what a financial statement looks like or what it's called, you definitely should come to the next class. It might require a budget narrative. Again, we'll cover that in the next class. It might require a 501c3 designation letter. It might require letters of commitment and support. The difference is in a letter of support, someone is saying like, Brenda, using you as an example, like I'm writing this letter of support for Keep Growing Detroit because they're important in my community. The difference between that and a letter of commitment is I'm partnering with Keep Growing Detroit on this project in my community to do X, Y, and Z. And my part of it is I'm in charge of outreach and engagement, and I've committed to do that portion of it. So be really clear, like if your proposal does have like a really strong community partnership, a letter of commitment from the partners saying, hey, I understand that I've been named as a partner in this project and I'm committed to do my portion, is a really, really strong thing. Some funders ask for a list of board of directors. Some funders ask for staff bios and resumes, sorry. Some ask for a list of funders, organizational chart, cover letter. Some of these things take like, a day to put together. If you don't have, bios and resumes from all your staff, right? Like you might need a day just to put that together. And if you have 3 days to get something in, then, you're short on time. And so again, having some of these things in some working form will really help you be prepared when an opportunity does arrive. Okay, record keeping and evaluation. I really love this stuff. So evaluation, I love it because it's all about accountability for me. I want to be accountable to the community that we serve. I want, when we get $1, to turn it into 10 and to get all of it out there in the community. Like the garden research program costs $240,000, and the value of the nearly 500,000 pounds of vegetables that are produced in the gardens across the city is like $1.5 million. So like we are, with those numbers, able to kind of really demonstrate the value of what we do, and also to like we write our annual report. Our number one audience for our annual report is the growers that we serve. It's for you guys. And it just so happens that, our partners like to read it, and it's really important for, you all to have those numbers to like put in proposals and things like that to share with friends and family. Funders like it, media likes it. It helps with like, when we have a lot of inquiries from students that are doing projects, it's really, really useful, but first and foremost, it's a tool to be accountable to the community we serve. So, really, really simple evaluation tools. There's qualitative. So qualitative are like the things, that like creates all the feels. So photos and videos, always with permission. You never want to tell someone else's story. You want to create a platform for them to tell their own story, and in a way that they're comfortable with. Quotes and stories are also examples of qualitative evaluation tools. This could be literally your social media channel, because what's on your social media? A lot of photos, a lot of videos. There was recently a grower who was had the threat of losing their land from a community-based organization that owned the land that they were on, and they basically were able to substantiate every single work day they hosted, produce distribution that they hosted, the transformation of the site on their social media, and the community-based organization really didn't have a leg to stand on, right? So like this stuff is really, really powerful to show your impact. Quantitative evaluation tools are things like sign-in sheets that can be turned into numbers, right? Like we talked about in-kind time, right? Like if someone wants to substantiate, like, oh, you say that you had 100 hours, but like, let's see the sign-in sheets to prove them. That rarely happens, but sometimes you are audited and things like that. You can substantiate those numbers through sign-in sheets. You can do really simple surveys. You can weigh the produce, right? To get we have an SOP, a standard operating procedure for like weighing produce. So that it like, does it get weighed with the soil on, with the soil off after it's washed? Like, how do you standardize it? And so, that's also very, illustrative of your impact. Keep grant agreements on file and put report deadlines and calendar. This is important record keeping. Retain records, like including sign-in sheets, for at least 3 years, just in case, again, you're ever audited. So grant agreements usually come, so if you're lucky enough to get awarded a grant, typically the foundation, the person will, call you or email you kind of informally to say congratulations. And, the grant agreement's on the way. A few days later, the administrative team sends a grant agreement. In the grant agreement, again, a grant is a contract. If it's restricted funding, it is a contract. And so it comes with a contract that says you'll do what you said you were going to do, and you'll turn in the reports when you said you were going to turn the reports. You sign it. The foundation signs it. You have an executed grant agreement, and then once they have a grant agreement, then they'll process the money, and it could take a month or two to like actually turn from like, hooray, we got it, to we have cash flow. Okay, so we're getting close to the end here. Just a reminder about two things. The word leverage. Many funders love the word leverage. And what that means, some funders, they just love their name. So they want to be the only funder of something, solely responsible for it, and tell everybody about it. But most funders, they want to be part of something bigger, right? And so they want to say, they have 2 applications to consider. One application, they're the only funder, and their $10,000 does $10,000 worth of stuff. In another application, they give $10,000, and that applicant is getting a lot of other stuff from other people, and they're leveraging their $10,000 to get another $20,000. So the value of their support is $30,000. Funders love to kind of see the value of their investment doubled, tripled, quadrupled. And that's called leverage. And KGD is one of the ways to leverage resources. You can say, the value of seeds and plants, garden development support, access to volunteers, we haven't run the numbers in a couple of years, but for community garden, the value of the garden resource program, just the seeds and plants and garden resources was something like $680. And then, if you were lucky enough to be one of the recipients of a high tunnel or an orchard or a rainwater collection system, is $1,500. And so, that's big if you're able to like get that sort of leverage that kind of community support from Keep Growing Detroit. And there's lots of other entities, right? Like there's the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, there's the Land Fund, there's just lots of other community-based groups that you can kind of amplify the work, leverage the resources with. Keep Growing Detroit's just one, but use us to understand the value that we bring and communicate, how it's being leveraged to raise additional funds. The other thing is many funders, not all of them, but some of them around here know about Keep Growing Detroit and what we do. And so in a grant proposal, if you're saying that you want to start a garden and you want money for seeds and plants, and you don't mention that you're in the garden research program, they may be like, oh, well, this person doesn't know about the garden research program. They don't need us. They just need KGD. So you may want to just mention us to signal to the funder, because like lots of people say Detroit's a really, really small, big city, right? Like many of the funders know each other, and they know the various organizations in the landscape. So just know that and act accordingly. The other thing that I haven't said, but I want to make clear, never ask two funders for the same thing. So in the case of the garden research program that cost $240,000, we could clearly say like funder A, we need 50,000 from, funder B for the same thing, the garden research program, we need 50,000 from, and then there's got to be C, D, E, F, G. That's how we string it together every year. So it's totally fine to apply for the garden research program for multiple funders until you reach your total goal. But if you're applying for, let's say, a specific project of starting an orchard and the total cost is $10,000, and you basically recycle a proposal to funder A to funder B for the same project, for the same line item, for the trees, for the soil, they're all the same, then that's unethical. You shouldn't do that. And worst case scenario is that they may compare notes at some point, and then that could impact your reputation, and that could really impact your financial health in the long run, because again, they all talk. So just kind of keep that in mind. Final thoughts. Healthy organizations maintain a diverse mix of funding sources and cultivate long-term relationships with funders of all types. Secure multiple rather than single sources of funding for essential expenses. So at Keep Growing Detroit, our most important resource is our staff. Typically, each person on our staff has 3 to 5 different funders associated with their salary, so that if they're a funder, as many are, that fund something one year and not the next, it's a one and done, we're not vulnerable. And if we're counting on the funds and they for some reason don't come through, we're not as vulnerable. Like really build a fundraising plan that's really diverse and has lots and lots of malleability, right? Like it can absorb shocks. So avoid the trap of selling short-term projects to funders. Real change is complicated and takes a long time. We don't do any justice when we pander to funders. And that's kind of a hard walk to walk. It's easier to kind of have straight talk with funders when you have a relationship with them. But generally, if you challenge things in a respectful way, I've found that it has really, it is endearing, and it helps to build stronger relationships with funders. And again, like we're not hoping to do structural change, systems change, right, to create a food sovereign city. If if we don't change philanthropy, frankly, we all have a part to play in changing philanthropy. So with that, I will just also share, that again, we practice what we preach. About 58% of Keep Growing Detroit's total revenue in 2020 was earned revenue and individual contributions. So, less than 50% we're relying on foundations. I think it's over 20% of Garden Resource Program members actually donate to the organization, which I think is like the highest compliment, right? That like the people we serve value our staff and what we do so much that they actually contribute to the health of the organization. Okay, so with that, I will remind you that there is an open book management, planning, budgeting, and bookkeeping workshop on the 18th at 6 p.m. And we also have a crop planning session, which I believe we're going to go over SOPs in more detail on the 23rd at 6 p.m. So with that, back to you, T.
Whew. That's a lot of information. Yep. Any questions from folks? I saw Angela and Brenda toward the end around, how to resources to kind of ground this work. Do you have any thoughts about organizations that help with the actual writing process? I thought maybe Michigan Community Resources. I know that as we have capacity, we're always happy to, maybe look at a draft or something like that. But any other thoughts around that there's a couple questions from Brenda and Angela at the end here.
I mean, practice makes perfect. A lot of funders, if you just try, right? Like just get some experience. Worst case scenario is that you get a rejection letter. And if that's the case, oftentimes you can get really valuable feedback on, what you did right and, maybe what could be improved. I'd be happy to review things. This is kind of like, in my mind, 25 people from what I'm seeing on the screen, like some of the most ready people to like take the next steps. I think that it's totally worth our time to spend to like help give people feedback on what they're writing. I learned by doing. So I don't know of a kind of a class or kind of book or anything like that really helps with the writing piece. There's if you're really self-conscious about like your writing or uncomfortable with it, there's lots of like creative writing opportunities through like In and Out, I think is one, which is like a local arts organization. There's community college classes for like writing. Any type of writing will help you get more, even if you journal every day. Like honestly, any type of writing will help you get in a place where you feel more confident with putting together these pieces.
All right. If there's any questions, feel free to jump off. Ashley, jump off of mute, not jump off, jump off of mute if you have any questions. Ashley, would it be really quick and easy to transform that PDF to a link that we can throw on the chat for your slides, or is that a couple minute process? I know a couple people asked for the slides. I could email them later, or if it's something that you could do easily, we can just throw it in the chat here.
Yeah, give me just a minute.
Okay. And then are you able to multitask and take a question from Tish while you're
yeah, of course,
while you're doing that? Tish, you want to come off of mute and ask, because you also maybe weren't totally clear on the pitch question as well. So if you want to come off and maybe ask some questions.
Right. I'm just not good asking for money. And so I just wonder, is there some type of a way that we can be coached, or is there some kind of an app where we can be instructed on how to approach people and not necessarily sound like we're begging for money, but to, give a good successful pitch to someone who we don't know, perhaps. Like if you're doing like a fundraising event, to approach people and say, hey, this is what your money is going to go towards, basically separating people from their money.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple of things. So I've never done this, but it comes highly recommended from a number of people. Toastmasters. Has anybody ever done Toastmasters?
No.
So basically, it's like a public speaking coaching kind of scenario that many people have said have helped them with public speaking. And in essence, like public speaking, a pitch is very similar to public speaking. I think that I'm all about, right, like building relationships in this community and knowing who's on this this Zoom. I would imagine that there are a couple of you who are at the stage where you're ready to kind of start drafting that vision and like translating it to paper and also the pitch, and that you could create some sort of like meet once a month through the winter. And I'm sure like a result of it would be just feeling way more comfortable and confident. And you'll definitely also get some really great relationships out of it. So anybody else have any suggestions about the pitch? It just, and honestly, it's practice, and it's one part practice and it's a lot of parts confidence.
Yeah, and I was just say being your like authentic self, and having that strong sense of your vision so that you're able to pull it out anytime you talk to somebody. But practice makes perfect.
Well, I know
Confidence
I
source
did
element.
IOB 1 year, and one thing that they recommend is that you directly ask friends and family. They said that when you do social media, that doesn't really bring in as much for your fundraiser as approaching, friends and family and just walking up to them and say, hey, I need, $10 or $5. Once you start getting up to hundreds and thousands, that's a whole different level, I think. So, if you
Yeah.
don't have rich friends, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, it's like a really long journey that happens like any other journey, is like one baby step at a time. There are people who are really, really good at like
Right.
leveraging their network, or being really compelling public speakers that kind of leapfrog where most of us kind of start and gradually progress. But generally, it's all similar. I think I got this link right. Let me see if that.
All right. Thank you. Those of you on the call, that link, and those who are asking for the slides, that link is now in there to the slides. And then the recording will go on the website in a few days here once I get it together. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tish.
Question. When you were mentioning that you shouldn't overlap when you were asking for donations for an item, and then you're saying you build relationships over a period of years, how long should you pursue that one funder for that one item before moving on to the next person or the next group for funding?
It depends on the funder. It depends on the funder, but I would say So let's say, let's just think about like the timeline, right? So let's say there's an RFP, you know, generally foundations approve grants on a quarterly basis that line up with their trustee meetings. And so generally that is how the RFP proposal deadline award kind of cycle lines up. So like, let's say we want to raise funds for an irrigation station and we apply, you know, in the September, the October, November, December quarter. So submission in October, trustee meeting in December. You'll get the notification at the end of December and the money in January typically is how it works. So you'll know at the end of December if you got it or didn't. And if you didn't get it, I would be prepared to submit the same, to recycle that proposal into the next funding cycle, which generally will, I mean, everybody's quarterly is a little different, but I would have a prospect ready around the end of December to place that proposal so that you'll know, like your second chance, right, is, you know, 3 months after the last chance that you have, right? So time is ticking. And you don't want to have the same proposal in for 2 funders, but the process takes typically a 3-month, you know, 3-month window. Does that make sense?
Yes, so the first time that we apply during that first window, if they don't accept it, then at that point you apply to a new one, or you try to revise your pitch and
I would try to apply to a new one for that thing. Meanwhile, I would ask the one that said no if they have any feedback for you, and then, you know, really take the feedback that they give, right? They could be like, oh, you didn't read the eligibility requirements closely, you're not eligible, right? Then, you know, then like the relationship ends there. But they may be like, oh, it was just really competitive this time, and if you would have done this, this, and this, you would have been, you know, you would have placed differently in our evaluation criteria. And so then, right, you can consider them for the next year. I wouldn't go back to back to back to back. I mean, in some cases I would, it just depends on the funder, but generally, you know, you're trying to cultivate relationships over a really long window of time. And so you want to be that funder, that grantee or that applicant that's like really thoughtful and taking, you know, and not desperate, and taking, you know, building their capacity, taking the notes, and then reapproaching that funder when there's another project that's a good fit, if that makes sense.
yes. Now, micro grants. What do you feel about micro grants? A couple of years ago, I attended a meeting at the Eastern Market, and one of the gentlemen said that it's better to start off with micro grants and then work your way up to the larger grants.
Oh
So
yeah,
that
I totally agree with that. I mean, you don't know what you don't know, and starting small helps you, you know, or starting somewhere that matches your capacity. And usually the first step, your capacity is low, right? You don't really know what it's like, or what's necessary. So starting with something that feels like you can knock it out of the park will either help you like really set up a track record for knocking it out of the park, or when something comes up that you weren't anticipating, it's not as huge as what it might feel like if the stakes were much higher.
Mhm. I would add to that. I'm co-chair of a nonprofit that I started with a few people called Black to the Land, and I'm finding like there's actually getting the grant, right? But then there's also like managing the money, managing the money and the accounting and that's a whole nother process. We're going to talk about that in 2 weeks at the open book management class. But just to say that, but yeah, I definitely say start small for me. That's been our path. Let me plug up my computer. Looks like my computer's about to die. Any final questions from the group? If not, we can log off for the evening. I did throw in okay, question was, do you have to register for these as a series? You do not. We just thought the fall was a downtime to do this kind of work. And so you can register for these individually. But they do kind of work together. Excuse me, I'm plugging up my computer here. So open book management is open right now, and crop planning will be on the website shortly.
And I guess just like as a final thought, like T can definitely back me up. Like I am an introvert. I don't like to be, I don't really like attention. I definitely, like I'm not like the most, I don't work rooms and like, I sometimes struggle, right? Like the same way that you guys are expressing, just inexperience or lack of confidence or, just kind of not knowing where to start. Like I'm totally there with you. I can totally empathize. And the only way I get through it is I just care I believe so much in what we do. And I care so much about it that my lived experience, right, of knowing it, of caring for it, of believing in it, I think just translates. And I think like whenever you just speak from the heart that way, passionately, even if you mix up your words or say a lot of ums, like the passion that you have will really translate.
Yeah. Final questions. Thanks for joining us tonight. Maybe I'll see a couple of you in the open book class. That'd be great. And feel free to reach out to us at any time about follow-up questions. Everybody have a good night. Can we do the corny? Bye. Off of the Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Brenda got
Adios.
me. Brenda know what I was talking about. Audrey know what I was talking about. Bye, y'all. Talk to you later. Good night, everybody. Yeah, Iris, thank you.
Good night.
Bye, y'all.
Oh, I don't know how to leave. Okay.